This is your host, Chris Graft, with a quick note for our listeners. This podcast was recorded about a week prior to GDC 2020's postponement. Thanks so much for your support, and stay safe and healthy out there. On GDC Podcast Episode 7, we've got Dave Lang, a tall guy with cool baseball hats who is Chief Product Officer at Iron Galaxy Studios. He's going to talk about game development in the 2000s, the Chicago game dev scene, the video game porting business, and much, much more. We'll be back in a sec. And we're back, and it seems that we have found Alyssa McAloon after after her being missing in action for an entire month.
I was going to try to figure out what the in-canon reason for me not being around last week was, but I haven't listened to the episode yet.
To find
out.
Yeah, it is canon that, it's the truth. The truth is canon. You were having your apartment building re-sided. And when I say you did that, you were the one who actually made the order for the
Yep,
the
and I've
re-siding.
been out there with the ladder and just yelling at myself.
Yeah.
Work faster, yeah.
And it turns out it's really hard to podcast when you're in a construction zone, and especially when you're a construction worker. Is that right?
They're still not done with it. So I was like, as we were approaching the time, I was like staring out the window, being like, "You gonna come hammer on the wall next to my office again? You gonna do it?" And they're staying away. They're very kind. Apparently, GDC podcast fans. So thank you to the construction team at my apartment building.
That's what I find. Yeah, that's what I find missing among contractors these days is the respect for the podcast.
Good game development techniques and contracting.
Well, they sound like a good crew, Alyssa.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's nice to have you back.
Thank you.
We got rid of that Alex guy whose last name we never did reveal. He might be back if the sighting continues.
That
at some
Alex,
point
Alex, someone's Alex.
Yeah. So let's do some morning announcements here, right? What's going on? What's going on, GDC?
I want is it Ferris Bueller with a dun 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 before they do the morning announcements at the high school?
We need that.
Yeah, can you edit that in?
Yeah.
Let me find my links here. For the Pioneer Award at GDC 2020, they've announced that Roberto Williams is receiving that award.
Yeah.
At the GDCAs during GDC.
Did you say Roberto?
Roberta? Roberta?
I'm
so bad with pronouncing names. I don't know why this is my job right now.
Who's Roberto Williams? Known for Kang's Quest.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you can handle that one because I can't talk today.
No, you're fine. I can't either. I can't believe words are able to spill out of my mouth right now, honestly. But Roberta Williams, Pioneer Award, because she did amazing stuff throughout her career with all the adventure games. Did you ever play any of Roberta Williams' adventure games from Sierra Online?
Oh shoot, yes I have. I'm very bad at connecting name dots. Sierra Online liked to find my childhood with weird adventure games that I didn't quite understand how weird they were at the time. Mixed up fairy tales. I never played King's Quest, but there was a Sierra Online one about fairy tales that was really dark, actually. That was great and gave me nightmares. There's another one, Pepper's Adventures in Time, I think was a Sierra Online game where you time traveled back and hung out with a stoner Ben Franklin. That one was also super dark and gave me nightmares. So,
wait, are you sure that this was a game? Well, you went back in time and you met Ben Franklin?
It could have. Maybe I'm just getting all my time travel memories and compartmentalizing them so they make sense to my child brain as, it was a video game. But...
Yeah. Well, that happens to me sometimes too. Roberto. So let's start getting our next guest in. He's just kind of hanging back here.
It was tough to sit back with the Roberto Williams talk, by the way. Because I have some Roberto Williams opinions.
There he is. There he is.
Best game bar none, in my humble opinion, is Gabriel Knight. That's the best Roberto Williams game.
Yeah. There was also, I remember... Wait, let me introduce you.
Okay, sorry.
You're completely breaking protocol.
That's my job.
As chief product officer.
I could get a stab at it and just put the accent on the wrong vowel, see where that goes.
Okay, yeah, let's try it. Okay, now our next guest, he cut his teeth as a game programmer in the 90s. If I get any of this stuff wrong, we're going to have to edit Wikipedia. Was studio tech director at Midway, where he oversaw games, including Stranglehold. And then he went on to found Chicago-based Iron Galaxy Studios, known for games like Killer Instinct and their amazing ports of video games. It is Dave Lange.
Close, very close. It's Dov Lange.
Okay, thank you.
You almost nailed it. You almost nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you for it's my pleasure's all mine. I love your work, Christ.
Now before we get let's talk about Roberta. Now I'm going to say Roberto. Roberta Williams stuff. What was your strong opinion there again, Dave?
Gabriel Knight series is without a doubt her best work, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain she worked on those games. I'm almost certain. I was going to Google it when you were talking to make sure I don't sound like an idiot, but I didn't want to hear a clackety clack in the background. I want to respect podcast etiquette. So at the risk of being wrong in a podcast, I'm going to strongly say those are her best games.
If the apartment building residers can just back off for a minute, you can refrain from tapping on your keyboard.
I can open
loudly.
the window. Maybe they can shout in their favorite game too. Just kind of get the whole experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I was working at GameStop when Phantasmagoria came out, and that was like a big deal because there were some adult scenes in that, and it was FMV and stuff.
I never played that one. That's one I skipped.
I didn't play it, but I did see the box on the shelf while working at GameStop.
I'm going to minorly derail the conversation to embarrass myself on the podcast quickly.
You're going to derail the derailment.
Derail the derailment. On the topic of mispronouncing names, just to get the ground nice and even here with my own name, which is Alyssa. I got my hair done over the weekend, and when I introduced myself to the woman dyeing my hair for 4 hours, didn't say my name, but she knew me from the invite, and she's like, "Oh, good to see you, Allison."
Yeah.
Nice.
In that moment, I did not correct her. And then for the next 4 hours, it was like too late. So I sat in the chair being called the wrong name because this is the hole I dug for myself.
There's a certain, how long do you think you're allowed to let, what is the window for correcting someone on your name? Because my full name is Christian with a K.
Yeah.
So when people see it on my credit card, they're like, here you go, Kristen. And that's fine. It's Christian. It happens.
Yeah. But if you don't say anything in those 3 seconds, anything longer than that, it's weird. Anything longer than that, you
think the window is 3 seconds?
It's it feels like
Dave,
20.
Dave, what do you think?
So I definitely shouldn't correct my title at this point, right?
No, you've got a new job now.
Okay, I'm now Chief Product Officer. We nailed it. Crushed it.
Oh, yeah. Wait, your project?
No, I'm entitled just founder.
Okay, just founder.
Just founder.
So it's not product.
No. It's not chief, it's not product, and it's not officer.
It's
my title.
It's not. Oh,
Chief
jeez.
For a while, I was calling myself C3PO for a while.
I was going to make that joke until I looked on your LinkedIn and you had already made the joke.
Yeah, because I was CEO, and then we brought Adam in to be CEO. I'm like, well, I need a title now, and I don't care about titles at all, but people I talk to do, and it should have a C in front of it, I guess. And so I was calling myself C3PO, and it just confused the shit out of everyone. So I've subsequently reverted to founder.
Now, when you say Adam, you're talking about Adam Boys.
Yes, Adam T. Boys Esquire.
Adam T. Boys Esquire.
Actually, I have no idea what his middle name is. He looks like a T, though.
Yeah, probably Todd.
Yeah.
Probably stands for Todd.
Terry. Adam Terry Boys. That's a horrible name. That sounds right. Yeah.
So
Theodore?
all of
Theodore.
I had to Google CPO. And I got all kinds of results for it.
So where that probably came from is when we did the flip. So I was the CEO, and Chelsea was our director of product development.
Now, you founded Iron Galaxy in 2008.
2008, right.
Yeah.
And then Chelsea joined me in 2010, I believe, in December 2010, something like that. And she's been along for the ride almost the whole time. She's employee number 13. And then when we brought Adam on board to be CEO, I wanted to make Chelsea in the C-suite too at that point. And so at that point, she became CPO, which was our Chief Product Officer. And then after about a year of that, she's like, it doesn't really encapsulate what I actually do. I'm just going to be COO. Everyone knows what that is. No one asks me any questions about COO. And then you be founder, and then we'll call it a day. And that's what we settled on. So, and there's a lot of confusion around the C-suite at Iron Galaxy.
Are you still considered a C-suite executive, even though there's no C?
I believe technically I'm above the C-suite in most people's minds. Yeah, I believe founder. There's two kinds of founders. Yeah. There's the founders who are still there and the quote-unquote power behind the throne and the people that actually get shit done. And then there's the founders who had to get out of the company because they said something racist on Twitter. And I'm definitely not the latter yet.
That's not you, though.
Yeah, not yet.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, dodge another bullet every day, you know? But so I'm still the first one, I hope, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, I'm not sure what you do. You're the very upper tier of your company, but you still got stuck doing the podcast.
Yeah, so you know what? I'm a podcasting person. I love podcasts. I have my own podcast, in fact.
Oh yeah, what's it about?
It's kind of like the Seinfeld of podcast. It's not really about anything. It's just me and my friends talking. Actually, you know what? Recently launched season 3, and season 3 we're doing game development origin stories. So I tracked down game developers and I talked to them about how they got into the business.
Have you talked to anyone about origins? Like, have you heard an interesting one yet?
The best one I heard, so I'm going with people I know just to see if the concept works, and it definitely works. The best one I've had in the podcast so far that I already knew is John Vignacchi. His is the best by far. He basically pre-internet stalked Mark Turmell and got a job just by stalking Mark Turmell. It was amazing. So
that's great. And also these names, you've been around the block.
Yeah.
When did you start game development?
So I started professionally in my first job was January '96 at Sculptured Software. Sculptured Software was a very prolific 16-bit developer. Like they did the Genesis version of Mortal Kombat, right? That everyone loves, and it's like
amazing.
And they were a port house, did a lot of stuff, and then they got bought by Acclaim. Like actually right before I got there, and I worked on Space Jam first for the Saturn. And then I worked on a game called NHL Breakaway for the N64. And as Breakaway was happening, all of the leadership team got fired by Acclaim. And they went off and started a new studio called Kodiak Interactive. So I finished the hockey game there and then quit and went and worked on WCW Mayhem and then WCW Backstage Assault at Kodiak. And then those games didn't really turn out the way anyone wanted, and so that studio started to close kind of dramatically. At the time, I was working on a baseball game for Kodiak, but Microsoft contracted Kodiak to do it. And when Kodiak folded kind of overnight, I ended up at the Microsoft Salt Lake studio to finish that game out. And I hated that job. That job was horrible.
Oh, yeah? What was so bad about it?
It was just not a good fit for me. Gosh... I don't want to speak
I can't imagine something not fitting your.
It's weird, right?
Yeah,
it's really weird. Like that place was so that was it was a really well established and fabled game. Like they did Tex Murphy, right? They did the Lynx. Yeah. They did the Lynx games. So they were a great developer that made a bunch of great games. But I guess there's no really kind of clean way to say this, but I wasn't a fit. I guess that's the best way to say it. And I was there for about 2 years and finished the baseball game, and then they're kind of like, hey, there's probably not another game for you to work on here, wink, wink. and so at the time, my wife is like, hey, let's have a family, let's go back home. And so originally from Chicago, and so went back and I interviewed with New FX, who became EA Chicago. And I interviewed at Midway, and I didn't really want to work at either place because this was the Fat Babies era, right? And going to Midway sounded like the worst job in the fucking world, right? And I just swore. I said I wasn't going to swear, and I just swore. Perfect.
It's 15 minutes now. In, yeah.
The floodgates are open.
And just rip the Band-Aid right off. Yeah. But I ended up going to Midway, and it ended up being the best decision I've made to that point in my career for sure. And I met a ton of talented people and worked on tons of cool things, and just learned a lot about game development there.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the Midway days because I started reporting on the industry in late 2005, and then a few years later, shit started really hitting the fan. At Midway. Can you talk about any interesting stories there? It seems like a tumultuous time. There's a revolving door of CEOs. Yeah,
I mean, there's literally no. What variety of story would you like? I mean, there's what kind of category? Because
a mafia involved story.
Okay, so
What?
I've got one of those. So there was always rumors that Midway was like the CEO at the time was a guy named Neil DeCastro, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was always rumors that he had mafia ties or was in the mafia or whatever, and I didn't believe any of them or whatever. I just oh, that's stupid. Like, there's no way. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then, my first week at Midway, and Midway was a weird place. It was like if you weren't at Midway like 30 years, like they treated you like you just got there and you never had a job before. And so the first week, like, no one talked to me. And I went to lunch by myself, and I found this little kind of sandwich shop, like, right around the corner from there. And I go in there, I order a sandwich, and the guy's like, hey, you look like you probably work at Midway. And I go, yeah, I just started. He goes, real family business they got going over there, huh? And I shit my pants on the spot. And I'm like, what have I done? Like, is this for real? Is this the thing?
Yeah.
And then the whole time I was there, I never heard another Mafia reference the whole time I was there.
Yeah.
But the first week, I was scared. I was scared.
That's
terrified.
great though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like blood in, blood out, right?
Yeah. I was like, at this point, I'm expecting like I'm gonna be like, digging shallow graves for people in the middle of Wrigley Field and burying people at the pitcher's mound. Like, I'm having visions of what's going down for me in my future, and none of it ended up happening. But it was pretty weird.
So the sandwich person I caught in your story, they said you look like someone that works at Midway.
Yes.
Why did you look like?
Because Midway at the time was in a, let's just say it was in a very diverse neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of Hispanic influences, a lot of Asian influences, and there weren't a lot of people that look like me, aka huge white guys,
tall white boys,
right? That kind of live that are like endemic to that region, right? Mm-hmm. And so, if one walks in. And, it's probably a Midway person, and sure enough, they guessed it correctly.
They're there. Yeah. Now, like, there was also the whole... Sorry, I slightly nerd out about some of this older
good
stuff, but, like, you were there as studio tech director, and I remember something going on trying to, like, a big deal near the end, making the switch to Unreal Engine 3.
Yeah, so when I started as I was the lead on Slugfest Loaded. That was my first thing there. And then I was the lead on Blitz the League. And then I spent like 6 months as tech director for all sports games, and then I got promoted to studio tech director. And about the time I was sports game tech director, Midway was on renderware at the time. Pretty much everyone was on renderware of some form or function. And Midway kind of made a strategic decision to switch to Unreal 3.
Yeah.
And thinking it's like, okay, so here's the way it's going to work is like we'll be able to share engines for the first time and share experiences. And like if game team A writes something cool, game team B, C, D, and E will benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And all these synergies that seem theoretical if you've never made a game before, seem theoretically possible. And so basically everyone, like, Stranglehold was, oh gosh, what was the name of that game? It was the telekinesis game. Psyops. Mm-hmm. So it's like Psyops, they had to ditch their engine to go. MK ditched their engine to go Unreal. Pretty much everyone that had like established franchises
in the middle of projects and series and
And then they came to the sports teams to do it, and the sports teams were like, well, no, our budget for the game is like the whole budget for Blitz the League 1 was $8 million. Like, if we wanted to like rebuild a game, and that's because that only works because we had like years and years of Blitz already there, right? And we had to like, what's new for this year or whatever. If we I'm telling you, if we have to switch to Unreal 3, it's a $20 million game. And like, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, exactly right. Like, let's just leave it as renderware. So aside from the sports games, everything was UE3 by the time the doors closed at Midway.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, it makes sense on paper to an executive, right? And
it's funny though, without them doing that experience, like Iron Galaxy doesn't exist today because like, one of my duties as studio tech director, so there was the core technology group, which was in the Austin studio, but every studio had an advanced technology group, and it was a room full of engineers, basically, and we were kind of tasked with, like, the lofty goals I talked about earlier, like, hey, if the Wheelman team builds a crowd system, now every team can use it, and the ATG team's job is to like distribute that or work on the tool, make the tool chain better, make the particle effects editor better, make the UI system better or whatever, then everyone benefits. But really what we ended up doing was just fixing bugs, improving performance, working on RAM considerations or whatever for the next game out the door. And so it was a room full of 25 really good engineers, and all we were doing was firefighting for the next Midway game coming out the door. Yeah. And as things started to disintegrate there, and it was clear, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be dramatic. I kind of realized, like, we have a room full of 25 people here just doing this for Midway. Like, we could do this freelance, I bet, and make some coin doing it and run a business. And it was shortly after that realization that I kind of punched out of there and started exactly that business.
That's cool. Yeah, that kind of brings us to Iron Galaxy, which is, it's immersed itself in porting and work for hire stuff and tech consulting. But you also do publishing, and you work on franchises like Killer Instinct. I know that original IP is in probably in the cards on the cards for you. But can you tell me about the affinity for the tech side? Is it just because of your background, or is it like a job stability thing? Having work for hire stuff.
It's how long do you want me to talk about this for?
I want you to talk for about 3 minutes.
Okay.
No, as long as you want. Yeah.
I got multiple versions of the story. I have a 3-minute version. You're in luck.
Okay.
Starting now. Okay. So basically, the reason Iron Galaxy exists is. I had the opportunity that I saw with the things happening, but like that's not the reason we did it. Like the reason we did it is I'd been at so many companies that had kind of closed overnight on me. Like, Sculpture kicked out the management. It wasn't the company I loved anymore. Kodiak literally closed overnight on me. Microsoft, right, a company with like $10 billion in the bank, told me I'm not welcome there anymore, essentially. I need to find a new job. Midway disintegrated around me. Like, it's like no place is safe. And I just wanted to build a game developer where I could work with my friends until I was done making games, right? Mm-hmm. I want to build a place that we can retire from if we want to retire from. And so stability is the thing we care about most in the world. And as such, we tend to work on a bunch of projects at once and a bunch of varieties of projects at once. And so, we started off doing kind of just tech consulting, like kind of like firefighting stuff. Then we branched into doing ports, and then we branched into doing original development. And kind of our portfolio now, ideally, we've got like one really big kind of creative project in the works, right? Whether it's Killer Instinct or Extinction or whatever's next for us, which we can't talk about quite yet. Mm-hmm. We're doing some ports, like we helped Blizzard do Overwatch, Diablo 3. We've helped with Skyrim switch port with Bethesda. And we're still doing a lot of co-development, and we have people embedded on teams at Bethesda and Blizzard and other places I can't mention yet. And so we kind of do all this different work, and we do like 10 to 12 different things at once. And we don't do it because it's easy. We do it because like if one of them goes away, no one has to lose their job, right? There's like plenty of work to go around for everyone else. And so we want to be doing it's like when people start at IG, what I tell them is like, okay, if you're coming here and you have a game in your head that needs to get out, this is probably not the best place for you to be, right? Because I'm not saying we're not going to make it. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's not a priority. Like what's important here is making sure that this company's built to last, and we're going to make robust decisions around ensuring that other people's bad decisions or games' bad performances don't affect us in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because when you describe the business tack of Iron Galaxy, it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. And then the next question is, well, why aren't more game companies doing what Iron Galaxy does? And I assume the answer is probably because it's really hard.
Well, it's weird. So it's a really complicated question. So there are people doing what we do. I think it's just more rare that you know who we are than more so that people don't do what we do, right? Like there's a bunch of companies out there who I think kind of followed in our footsteps and realized like, oh yeah, we can, because like when we started this company, it was pretty common for people to think you can't outsource engineering, like they had just barely gotten used to outsourcing art, and like, oh no, engineering is too iterative and it's too collaborative and it'll never work. And then we kind of showed, yes, it can work. And so there's companies that do it like we do it now, and there's companies that have been doing ports longer than we've been doing them. It's just for a variety of reasons, we've kind of emerged from that group as one of the developers people know about more than the others, right? So there are a bunch of people behind the scenes kind of doing this kind of work. It's just maybe they're not as recognized as we are.
Yeah.
So I think when I was doing my obligatory research into all of this,
the internet stalking. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to put a spin, but here we are. So I was reading about how that's kind of the gist of your studio. What you do is a lot of like support for other projects and stuff like that, and that reminded me of Psyonix, Rocket League developers did I watched I think it was a no-clip documentary about them. And they were talking about how they did a similar kind of thing where but theirs was more, they did a bunch of like, helped other people with their projects to keep themselves afloat while they chased their dream projects. But that's kind of like a same starting point but different goal from what you guys are doing, right?
Yeah, it's a subtle, like I know the Psyonix guys fairly well, Dave and the crew over there. Well, that's probably overstating it, but I know them. And we've talked about
best
this.
Friends.
And we've talked about this stuff from time to time before Dave became a billionaire and doesn't talk to anyone anymore. But it's like, I think one of the differences between us and other people that do this work, right, and one of the reasons I think we have kind of risen to the surface is I think a lot of companies do the work we do to pay for the game they want to make, right? And as a result, that shows in the work they do, right? Maybe they don't have an even distribution of talent across all the projects. Maybe people that are on, the support jobs or the port jobs are bitter they're not on the creative thing, and they're kind of pissed off about that, and they're not doing their best work or whatever it is. And that's just not what we do. Like here, everyone understands that every project's important, everyone's work is important for ensuring the goal of, we're going to be here to fight another day no matter what, right? And so I think that's one of the differences between us and almost everybody else. Because they're looking to get that breakout hit and become financially independent. And that would be great if it happened, but it's not a goal. Like the reason we do creative things at all is one, it's it would be nice and the 5% chance we have something that hits hey, now money's not really as much of a concern as it normally is. But really what it is we want, diversity in partners and diversity in projects, and platforms. You never know, I'm not an analyst, right? I don't know which way the industry is going to go, but I do know if we have experience doing something, it's easier to get those kind of jobs in the future, right? And let's say co-development dries up overnight, and then we need to become a studio that pitches more creative IP. Well, we've got experience doing that, right? Or whatever it is. So it's more like a strategic thing than I've got to make this game. Holy shit, is this my ambition in life, is to make this thing?
Yeah. And it seems that you have an opinion about quality of life, job stability, things like that, and that was informed by your past experiences. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you think that quality of life in the game industry has gotten better or worse or stayed about the same over the past 15 years?
Oh, it's definitely better. It's it couldn't be any worse than it was when I started. And I do want to clarify something. I do tend to talk about this a lot or get asked about this a lot. And I think one thing I kind of universally do a bad job at explaining, Iron Galaxy has not always been this oasis where we don't crunch, right? In the beginning, I'd say the first 3 or 4 years or whatever, we all worked our asses off, right? And then at some point, I just kind of decided, you know what? If this is the way it has to be, then it's kind of not worth doing. And it wasn't overnight, but we slowly kind of built a culture of no crunching and zero tolerance of that sort of thing. Some people still work hard, and some people still put in extra hours because they're passionate about stuff, but it's something we try to monitor. And the company will never ever ask anyone to work more than 40 a day. With the conversation I have with everybody in the studio, it's listen, I don't need you to work 41 hours. I just need your best 40. And as long as you're giving me your best 40, that's all I care about, right? And so it's something I feel pretty strongly about now. And I think we've proven you can do it. The hard part with creative projects and no crunch policy is, as someone, I talk a lot about doing creative projects is a strategic thing for us, but that doesn't mean we don't have people here that are incredibly passionate about making Killer Instinct as good as it can be or whatever, right? Yeah. And a game can always be better, right? It can always be better. There's always something that can be better, and developers know what can be better. We're not blind. We play the game, we see these problems, and so having the discipline to kind of walk that line and take care of yourself while feel you're doing your best work is very challenging on creative projects. And I think I think the industry still sucks at it, but it's like through the lens of like, wow, that's a really hard problem. Like, I'm not sure exactly what the solution there long term is.
Yeah. Well, there you go, folks. Dave doesn't have a solution for crunch.
Yeah, weird, right?
Work-life balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our solution is we just don't do it, and if a game needs more time, our solution isn't like make people work 80 hours a week. Our solution is go to our partner and get more time from them. You know, but that's an imperfect solution too, right? That's like comes with its own perils. So, yeah.
How's that conversation tend to go when you reach out to a studio you're working with and you're like, hey, we need more time to do this. We can't do this in the amount of time in interest of keeping my staff happy and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, it's gotten easier over the years as our partners have kind of gotten used to us and know the work we do and the quality we do. It's been kind of like when we were just getting going, it would have been impossible, right? And with some of the partners, I'm not going to name names, it would like literally if we told them up front, like, hey, we're not going to crunch this project, like, we wouldn't get the gig, right? It's just like flat out, we just wouldn't get it. But now, 11 years into this thing, everyone knows who we are, everyone knows what we stand for. You know, the track record of our work with this policy kind of stands on its own merits. And either you care about that, you care about like making a good game, like, you know, or you care about other things. And if you care about other things, they just don't call us. You know, we have kind of like self-selected a client list of people that care first and foremost about game quality. And because of that, those conversations are not nearly as hard as they would be otherwise.
What port, is there like a port that you're particularly proud of that Galaxy did? Yeah,
I mean, it's still Street Fighter 3 Third Strike Online Edition.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt. Like, that was our first kind of like big, quote-unquote, big break. And, you know, there was a bunch of hand-wringing about some of the details about the game, like really, really nitpicky stuff. But I just couldn't be prouder of the game we put out. It's kind of like our first effort, and the response it received, and it's still kind of seen as like the gold standard of Capcom fighting game ports. And that's without a doubt the one I'm still proudest of.
Yeah.
So my partner, I mentioned that we were doing this interview with you, and he's like, "Oh, holy shit, Third Strike!" Immediately without missing a beat. So I've definitely got.
I still got that. I played a crap load of that on PlayStation 3, and still break it out every now and then if I want to get my ass handed to me.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like you know, the version we did isn't in the Capcom or Street Fighter 30-year edition or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's like a different version, and it's like I know why Capcom did that. Like but it's like just so weird that there's people out there playing a version of Third Strike that's not the one we did, and it's bad. It's just really weird.
Why didn't they include your version?
I assume it's financially. There's financial reasons tied to it, is what I'm assuming. They never even called us and asked us about it. So
that's weird.
Yeah, I would assume it's some kind of financial. They didn't want to engage with us because of cost reasons. Is my assumption. Again, I didn't talk with anyone at Capcom about it, but I did find it pretty weird. So,
so Iron Galaxy is in Chicago. I actually
we have two studios. We have Chicago and Orlando.
Oh yeah, that's right, Chicago. Where are you calling from? Are you in Chicago right now?
Yeah, Chicago right now.
Yeah. So I used to live in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Nice.
And then we used to jump over there for Bears and Cubs games.
Okay.
I love Chicago. Just the vibe there is like so good, and my kind of vibe. What's the game dev scene like there?
It's pretty not great, I would say.
Okay.
And I think among Chicago people that might be a contentious opinion, but like you've got NetherRealm who's still here and making kick-ass games, right? Like MK and all the games, Injustice, those games just keep getting better and better and better. And they're like the top of the craft in that stuff. Shout outs to them. There's us. You know, there's people who've been around here forever, like High Voltage. Then there's a kind of indies that are kind of up and coming, right? Like you got Young Horses here, who did Octodad, and they're probably gonna start talking about their next game here really soon. You got a lot of indie people kind of getting things going, but it just doesn't feel like a game development hub to me. like people don't come here for game development, right? People don't think about Chicago. Like if you go to the random person and say, hey, give me your top 10 game development cities, like I don't think most people name Chicago, right? And so I think it's not great, and I get it. Like the reason we opened the Orlando studio is because it's not great here, and recruiting is very hard. Like when we're recruiting people with experience, they're usually coming from like a warmer climate, or at least a coast or something, right?
Yeah.
And they have one of two reactions. They either think they're going to freeze to death or get shot the minute they get off the plane. And so recruiting is really hard, and the city, there's not a lot of economic support from the city. And so if this is something like all those problems, the weather obviously you can talk to, the crime you can talk to. The crime is largely a myth. But really, if you want people to start growing businesses here and like not move, half the development studio to Orlando, then we need support from the local government that we're not getting.
Yeah. So how big are your studios in each city?
So we are about 140 people across both of them, and it's about like 55-45 Orlando right now.
Yeah. That's reasonably medium.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like one of those things too where it's weird, like like we started in 2008, like a month before like the global recession essentially. And while it made it impossible to get a loan for anything, it ended up like it's the reason we're probably still standing is because of that thing. And it's like you talk about like cognitive biases, right? Like it'd be really easy in our position to have like survivor's bias, right?
Yeah.
That like, oh yeah, we must be great because we're still here. But like if you look at us, it's like one of the real reasons we're still here, and I believe this with all my heart, and this is like no bullshit. Like when that recession hit, a lot of people started making fewer and fewer games every year, right? And budgets kind of bifurcated. Budgets, they went smaller and bigger, and the middle was already started drying up, but it just kind of disappeared altogether.
Yeah, that totally the bottom fell out of the middle. So then you just have like really big or small.
Right. And so there were a bunch of developers at the time that are our size now that like had to scramble. They had to go to Facebook games or mobile games or go out of business altogether, right?
Yeah.
And so then when the economy kind of stabilized, there was this void of developers this size that do this kind of work. And it allowed us to kind of grow into that space much easier than we would have otherwise, right? Because we didn't have to displace these 20 other veteran studios that have been doing it better longer than we've been doing it, right? And so it's really weird to think about, like, oh, that was a really good thing for us, but I have no doubt it was at this point.
Well, there's like the talent, like when those like medium-sized studios, medium-sized publishers close down, then you kind of have all of the talent. You have a recruitment pool,
right?
Essentially.
Yeah.
And so there you have it. You benefited from the recession.
Massively, yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So when you're talking about successes and failures at Iron Galaxy, what have you learned about what players want and finding an audience? And I know that you do some, a lot of your work has to do with, studios themselves. But I know that you do Killer Instinct, and you've commented. I watched part of your GDC talk, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to what you've learned about the audience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still feel like we've got a lot to learn there. Frankly, I don't think listening to the audience and being aware of their concerns is a skill we've fully developed at this point, and I think it's something we need to be better at. But generically, it's it's really easy to engage with people that are saying things you agree with, and if there's people who are saying things like maybe they're not even trolling or whatever, they're just saying a view you disagree with, it's really hard to have institutional discipline to interrogate that feedback in a dispassionate way and say, okay, is there value here or not, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to dismiss Twitter feedback. It's so easy to dismiss forum feedback because so much of it is just horrible, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is something we need to be better at, and we need to figure out how do we actually interrogate some of these notions in a dispassionate way, because I think our knee-jerk response is, oh, just ignore it all, right?
Yeah.
It's a really, really difficult problem because you should ignore most of it, because most of it sucks. but like that doesn't mean there's nothing out there that's valuable or good. And for when we were a certain size, like I remember with Third Strike, I'd get a handful of emails a week from people who were passionate about Third Strike, and a lot of them were nasty. But then 9 times out of 10, I'd engage with the person and be like, "Hey, listen, if you're going to talk to me like that, I'm not going to continue this conversation. But if you want to have a discourse about like how do we make this game better, okay, let's do that." 9 times out of 10, those people respond with, "I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone would even read this thing. Like, but here's the problems I see them, and they were really good, right?" And now the problem is, like, we're to the size and scale. Like with Killer Instinct, we just couldn't do that, right? There's like too many people. And I feel like that's a valuable job, though.
Yeah,
like,
Twitter is more prolific too. I mean, you can't, have that conversation. Like nowadays, they say like, "Look, you're being a jerk," and then they'll just come right back. It's like, "Well, fuck you anyway."
Yeah, exactly.
Quote tweet you, put you on blast.
Yeah. People used to be. I remember that because like if people would say like mail me something like nasty, and then I mail them back, it's like surprise.
Yeah.
Surprise, motherfucker. Like this is a person, and then they're like they would back off immediately. But I don't think it's like that anymore.
That's actually, I think, one of the best things about my Twitter persona is like I've cultivated like a view of myself from people that is impervious to trolling. Like who is going to send something nasty to me? Like I put so many stupider things out than you could ever tweet at me every day. Like there's nothing you can do to get to me. It's like impossible. And
I've been trolling myself this whole time.
Right,
you
exactly.
Can't do anything. You can't.
Like turns out I'm dumber than you are, as it turns out. Ha ha ha! Joke's on you.
Yeah. You just self-deprecate yourself into like invincibility.
Yeah, it's worked out inadvertently well. Yeah, like many things in my life.
We're probably getting close to wrap up time, but we need to hit a couple things here. I think I'm not really caught up with. There's a thing with you and Windjammers and Adam Boys, I think, or what's the story there?
So Windjammers, this is not my finest moment. It was
Go on.
It was like I want to say like maybe 6 GDCs ago. I was day drinking, and then I remembered I was supposed to go on the Giant Bomb stream that night, and I got on the stream and I was blasted. I was out of my frickin' mind, gone. I should not have been on.
This is a no judgment zone. We've all done stuff like this.
Friends should have stopped me from going on, but so Vinyaki knew we had Killer Instinct signed. But we were announcing it like the Tuesday. We had a big like exclusive in Polygon that was dropping Tuesday after GDC, and so but he because he's a good friend, quote unquote. He was trying to get me to like ruin all that and spill the beans on the Giant Bomb thing. He goes, "Dave, I hear you've got a big announcement to make." And luckily, by the way, this should cement to all, like, as embarrassing as that show was for me, like, if you have a doubt I can keep a secret, look at that fucking stream. Like, because I just, without a beat, I look at the camera, I go, "Yes, I have an announcement to make. You'll never have another Windjammers." Because Giant Bomb at the time had been playing a lot of Windjammers. It was something that was a staple on their like Friday show. They'd play it live. And I don't hate Windjammers. I've never even played Windjammers. I don't care. I just thought it was a funny thing to say. And then from that moment on, I was the guy who hates Windjammers.
That's a very random game to choose.
Yeah. And so that might kind of like, as I mentioned, I was hammered. And so from that point on, I became like Dave Lang, professional Windjammer hater.
Yeah, I know. I was reading rumors like you owned the Windjammers property.
Yeah, I was keeping it under wraps so no one else could ever enjoy it again. Yeah.
There's another Windjammers coming out. Did you like will that into existence somehow by just being like no so much that Windjammers 2 just...
It's pretty funny how that Windjammer stuff goes, because like every time there's a Windjammers trailer for 2 or an announcement for 2 or whatever, like people tweet at me like, "Haha, you were wrong." I'm like, "Hey, it's not out yet. Also, it's not out yet." Like,
yeah. So I think also we have to have you and Alyssa talk on air about Hitman. So let's just open the floor for any Hitman map conversation or
there was the moment when we were doing our stalking, had a podcast there again, where I've already established I have a bad time linking names and like what people have done. It takes me a second to like connect those dots. And I was just literally like sitting at my desk. I'm like, holy shit, he's the guy who made the Hitman list, because I had discussed that in Slack recently. So, because for Giant Bomb, your end of the year list this last year, you ranked the Hitman maps in 2016 too.
Yeah, I've been doing that Giant Bomb list for almost a decade now, and as this company's gotten bigger and bigger, I have fewer and fewer time to play games. And so, like, I literally didn't play 10 games I liked last year, right? And so I can't do, like, a top 10 list. And so I just come up with, like, hopefully creative, original things to do every year. And people seem to like that list. It seemed to go over pretty well, so, yeah.
It was a good list.
Yeah.
I only, like, I was going to disagree with it, and then I get to the bottom, and you're like, oh, there's no such thing as a bad Hitman map. And I'm like, oh, you're right.
Yeah, there's only some that are better than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Colorado's one of the... Okay, not to get too fan about Hitman talking here, but like Colorado for the longest time was like my least favorite Hitman map. And then that was going through it the first time when I'm still like learning the magic of the game and kind of all those systems you memorize and all the steps you memorize and the weird little ways that you can interact with NPCs that you figured out to kind of like game the system. And then going back, like Colorado is an entirely different experience once you have that little bit of knowledge under your belt.
Yeah, my personal Colorado story is filled with tragedy and heartbreak.
Yes.
So the way Colorado goes is there's 3 targets, right? And then there is a secret door with like a facial scanner in the basement of one of the houses, and you need to build like a 3D print a mask to get into that door, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the mask is of someone you killed. And I didn't know about the mask bit. And so I killed the guy on the other side of the map. And I carried him stealth mode all the way. I was going to like hold his face up to the door. And so I played that map for 2 frickin' hours, and I hauled him from the cornfields all the way into the house without being seen. Herculean task, and I get to the door, and there's no frickin' prompt, and I was so mad. I was just getting angry just thinking about it. I'm like, how? If this isn't even the way you do it, how is this not like scripted? This is the worst game of all time. And I put Hitman down for a little bit, and I came back and like, yeah, Colorado. It was at that point it was the worst map by far, but subsequently
it's so brilliant though if that worked.
Yeah,
I feel like I might be wrong, but I thought I read that worked, so I don't know if they patched that in eventually, or I could be just making something up right now.
Maybe IO Interactive heard Dave's story.
I've talked about it enough places. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
I mean, if they kept the suitcase or the briefcase with the
homing,
the homing briefcase, where if you throw it, it's not quite as fast, or it's a little bit faster than the run speed of the NPCs. So they'll start sprinting away from it, and it'll track them and follow them and fly through the air. And they like instead of patching that out as a bug, they like doubled down on it, which is IO's great.
Yeah, one of the best gifts in Hitman in recent times is the guy throwing the briefcase at the guy in the jet ski.
Yeah.
And the briefcase just like homing missiling the guy in the jet ski. Amazing. Yeah.
Yep. I think I forget who the level designer was, but she gave a talk at GDC last year and talked about kind of like the different kinds of like level of spaces they designed in a Hitman level and like color coded everything and broke it down. It's a really great talk. Not sure if it's on the YouTube vault, but it's out there, and you should really watch it or read my live tweets or my article about it. But
there's also a great no-clip documentary on Hitman as well.
Yes. Watch all this material about Hitman. But she was talking about Colorado and what made it different and why people didn't like it so much is because in Hitman games you typically have your 2 spaces in level design, or like on the broader category where they're these social stealth places where you can walk around normally, and as long as you don't do anything inherently illegal, no one's going to get pissed at you. And these more secure spaces where it's like, this is a trespassing zone, there's armed guards, and like once you're in this spot, you have to be stealthy or you have to blend in. And Colorado is all that second space, which made it so difficult because there's no like safe place.
Yeah, getting started. You got to get that first outfit, and then
it's so difficult and such a different kind of like level design. But like even that, when you play enough of the game and you go back to it, really shines as a I don't know. Level design in Hitman is so good. I could talk about it forever.
Yeah, I mean, they're geniuses. Like, I have obviously things I like or don't like about the map. Like, my personal take on why most of the 3 target maps aren't as good as the other maps is because, like, they have the same amount of, like, set pieces as the 2 or 1 target maps, but they're spread across 3 targets. And so
Yeah.
killing everyone is just kind of inherently, there's less interesting and less variety ways to do it. And so it's just kind of just not as good. And it's like, I would love to go to I.O. one day and just kind of sit with people and just talk about it and chop it up just as a fan, because that would be super
Yes.
fun. Yeah.
But they it's another interesting thing is on the basic level, because the multi-target ones can feel like 3 different games to a lower level person, but then you watch someone who speedruns the game play it, and they'll set this up while running and with one hand tied behind their back and hit a button at the exit. All 3 die at the same time, they leave, and I don't know, it's just designing a game that can take that level of variance is just very interesting. And we should talk about other things that are Hitman. I apologize.
No, I'm just gonna let it go. Keep going. Yeah. Well, this is a good good place to stop, and a good way to stop, I think. This was lovely. Thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate you taking time. I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
And we are back. Well, how about that Dov Lange? Dave Lang?
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't even. I tried to deliberately mispronounce it, and my mouth is like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, the brain-mouth connection is melting with Alyssa.
Yeah, or Allison. I'm just going to rebrand my entire...
That's really going to confuse me if you keep on saying that. And it's going to be just like, oh, you can't even, get the name of, the woman on your staff right.
This is all. I was just it's not quite gaslighting, but I'm just setting you up for failure. It's the long con.
That's all right. I like a challenge. So the Dave conversation, that was good. That was one of the most fun podcasts that we've done yet.
I think all our podcasts have been equally fun.
They've been.
People we've interviewed.
Some of them have been. Let's be honest. Some of them have been better than others.
Yeah, last month's when I wasn't here. No, I haven't listened to it. I'm sure it was great.
Oh yeah, that one was great. Yeah, that one was good. No, all of our guests, they are equally loved by us. We play no favorites.
But that was a really good chat.
Yeah, I like just starting out, just just talking about random stuff. Like Gabriel Knight and Roberto Williams, your favorite.
I'm gonna lose sleep over that one. I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right.
If she listens to this ever, I am so sorry.
Yeah, she's not. I don't think you have anything to worry about there. Yeah, it's cool talking to someone who's been in the game industry for a long time, and a lot. This is a young industry, so it's kind of. I don't know. I'm trying not to sound ageist here. Dave's older than the youngins that we've had on before. I'm somewhere right in the middle between Dave and the younger people who have accomplished more than I ever.
So we've had a good career representation throughout our trajectory so far. So that's great.
Yeah.
But no, it is always really wonderful to hear those conversations about the old days of the industry. And how things were way back then with certain companies that maybe don't exist anymore, or maybe have gone on to a completely different image or something like that.
It's funny because it's not even you say the old days, but it does. I mean, it was 2003. Yeah. And but it does feel like that because things move so quickly in the industry. I feel like, and it's at times volatile. Yeah. And I love how. It's kind of I did report pretty extensively earlier on in my career on Midway. Mm-hmm. So to have somebody that was there, during that time in the 2000s, I love how he was just okay, what kind of interesting story do you want to hear about Midway? And then I'm mafia. And then it's just okay, well.
Did you know going into that there was a mafia story? Or was that just a...
Yeah, I knew that there had this rumored background, but that's just hilarious. The sandwich guy. I was sitting here
slack-jawed the whole time being what's going on?
I like the sandwich guy just going, that's a real nice family business they got going on over there, huh?
I could picture that scene in my mind as he was saying it.
Yeah, young, impressionable Dave going in to get his meatball sub.
It's also nice to hear like the issues that studios still face in the industry against like how it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
With like, and those are still issues. If they're more of an issue, less of an issue with like crunch, and like how he said it's gotten like that kind of awareness has gotten better, about the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a whole hour ago. I don't remember what exactly the
no,
word
he
was.
said that. No, Dave said that the work-life balance and quality of life in the game industry has gotten, undeniably better.
Yeah, which is a nice perspective to kind of like reflect on, because it's easy to get caught in like the moment-to-moment issues, which are still important and should be focused on. But like the larger scheme of things, it's also good to have that big picture.
Yeah, and I'm glad that at least one person benefited from everyone's loss during the recession. So, but it's true though. That's interesting. Like what he was saying, because there was speculation at that time, because you had like THQ going out of business, Midway was one of them, and really just the middle falling out of the industry, and that like impacted so many things, like even games media, it impacted that. These are publishers that would pay for advertisements, and so that recession, it had this ripple effect. But there was also talk about, well, now there's all this talent that's out there, so then you see people either leave the industry or they found, Iron Galaxy, and then the people who still want to work in the industry, there's a talent pool now, and they go and either found their own stuff or go to work on startups. Yeah,
like making the best of a bad situation, but in like a really unique way. But the entire like studio structure of Iron Galaxy is just really interesting, because like, you hear about like studios that do make their bank doing like support work for other games, and they're not the ones that you hear. They're not like the blank game by blank studio. That's not the headline.
Yeah.
But the work they do is really important, and he employs 140 people at that company, which is like way larger than I thought that was before reading about any of that, at 2 locations.
Yeah.
And just like highlighting the importance of like that kind of work and the value of that work and like the place that has.
Yeah.
It was a really nice part of the conversation.
Yeah, they are the unsung heroes of game development. And we can kind of end on this, but the job stability, making that the goal, is super interesting to me. And that's not as glamorous, as saying I have this idea, and then you execute, and then it becomes a hit. A tiny fraction of
you have like
that success happens to people.
Yeah, you have more studios kind of like going for the same kind of thing. Like indies will like a lot of co-ops lately. It's been talked about like more and more, where like the team owns the studio, and kind of getting job security and putting employees first that way.
Yeah.
And then Iron Galaxy is like it's the same idea, but a completely different path for that, and just like seeing how those both work.
Yeah. So there we go. You don't always have to be the next John Blow. I want to be the next Dave Lang, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to get a little...
You program or what? Yeah.
We'll have to get a little taller and a little more Caucasian. But I think I could do...
It's important to dream big.
All right, that's it. So check us out on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and someday we'll upload some more of these to YouTube, but we've got a couple of them up there right now. Just don't read the comments. But if you like what you heard, like and subscribe. We would love to have you. And that's all for this month. Thanks, Alyssa.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.